This is the story of how I lost my wife, my savings, and my dignity. I eventually got two of them back, and honestly, dignity is overrated. 3 months ago, I was Tom Granger, a guy with a steady IT job at Morrison Industries, a decent home in the Cleveland suburbs, and a gorgeous wife named Vanessa. I thought I had life completely figured out, but the first crack in my perfect world appeared on a routine Tuesday morning. I was hauling our recycling bin to the curb when I overheard Vanessa on her phone in the kitchen. Her voice had a breathy, flirtatious tone I hadn't heard in years. She giggled, teasing a guy named Shane that my presence outside gave them 5 minutes to talk, adding that she couldn't wait for their upcoming trip to Chicago. Shane was her boss at Meridian Design, a wealthy guy with a luxury SUV and effortless confidence. Shocked, I dropped a bag of empty wine bottles onto the driveway. By the time I walked inside, Vanessa was calmly loading the dishwasher, claiming she had just been talking to her girlfriend Monica. That evening, I pretended to work while Vanessa hummed in the bathroom, getting ready for another late client dinner. As she walked out in a cloud of expensive perfume, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon to drown out my growing paranoia. Vanessa and I had met 6 years ago at a local gym bar owned by my best friend, Rick Daly. Rick, a 3-time divorcee who knew relationship disasters when he saw them, had warned me early on that Vanessa was too high maintenance for me. But I was 33, lonely, and captivated by her beauty. We threw a lavish wedding that left us $20,000 in debt, a move she defended as an investment in our future. Over the past 5 years, the warning signs began mounting: secret phone calls, late nights, and a sudden control over our household finances. She insisted on handling all the bank statements and password-protected files, even lecturing me about cutting back on lunch expenses while she bought designer clothes. The night after overhearing her phone call, I lay awake in bed, staring at her back as she slept. My phone buzzed with a message from Rick, who noticed I looked like a kicked dog and offered to meet for drinks. The next day at work, I was too distracted to focus on network troubleshooting. During my lunch break, I drove to Meridian Design and parked across the street like a budget private investigator. Minutes later, Shane's BMW pulled up, and Vanessa stepped out of the building, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me, and when Shane placed his hand on the small of her back, the painful truth crystallized. She wasn't just having a casual fling, she was choosing a completely different life with another man. That night, Vanessa came home late with another client story. Once she went upstairs to shower, I did something I'd never done in 6 years of marriage. I searched her purse. Inside, I found a receipt for a luxury downtown dinner for 2, dated that very evening. I immediately called Rick, and an hour later, we were sitting at our local dive bar. When I confessed my suspicions about Vanessa and Shane, Rick warned me not to jump straight into a blind confrontation. He pointed out that Vanessa handled every dime in our household and urged me to check our bank accounts, credit reports, and investments before taking action. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and dug into our financial records. What I discovered made my stomach churn. Over the last 6 months, our joint checking account had been systematically drained of $25,000 through small, steady transfers. Our house down payment savings account was gutted from tens of thousands down to a mere $300. To make matters worse, there were secret credit cards maxed out to $40,000 in both of our names. Panicked, I called Rick, who invited me down to his gym's private office. He had spent the night researching Meridian Design's corporate filings and discovered a silent partner who had recently invested $50,000 into Shane's firm, Vanessa Granger. She wasn't just cheating, she was actively stealing my money to bankroll her lover's business. Instead of confronting her empty-handed, Rick convinced me to gather irrefutable evidence and turn the tables on her. That night, Rick and I tracked Shane and Vanessa from an upscale downtown restaurant to Shane's sprawling modern home in the suburbs. Watching my wife walk into another man's house extinguished the last lingering hope in my heart. replacing my heartbreak with a cold, sharp anger. The next morning, Vanessa strolled into our house at 6 a.m., smelling of expensive cologne, and claiming she'd fallen asleep at Monica's after too much wine. I played along seamlessly. Once she left for work, I met Rick at his gym alongside Danny, a cybersecurity expert. Within 2 hours, Danny mapped out her digital footprint, uncovering credit card charges for luxury hotels, fine dining, and lingerie dating back 8 months. More crucially, Danny tracked the stolen funds to a joint investment account owned by Vanessa and Shane, holding $73,000. At the rate she was siphoning cash, I had 3 months before complete bankruptcy, and a fresh text from her about an upcoming conference in Miami suggested she was preparing to abandon ship entirely. 3 days later, an unexpected medical emergency shattered everything. I received an urgent call from Cleveland Clinic, informing me that Vanessa had collapsed at work and was in the emergency room. I rushed to the hospital in a blur of anxiety and cynicism. Her attending physician, Dr. Chen, took me into a private consultation room to explain that Vanessa had suffered a severe blackout caused by untreated pelvic inflammatory disease, a condition typically stemming from a long-term sexually transmitted infection. Then came the second blow. Medical exams revealed Vanessa had secretly undergone an abortion 6 weeks prior. For 2 years, Vanessa and I had been trying to conceive, yet she had gotten pregnant by another man and terminated the pregnancy behind my back. Stunned, I sat in her hospital room, looking at her sedated body, feeling an overwhelming sense of clarity and relief that I was no longer the crazy, paranoid husband. While sitting by her bedside, my phone buzzed with a message from Shane, asking where I was because the hospital staff wouldn't release information to a non-family member. I walked down to the main lobby and found Shane pacing nervously near the information desk. I confronted him directly, asking if he was sleeping with my wife. Terrified and cornered, Shane confessed to their 8-month affair. But when I brought up her abortion and the $73,000 she had stolen from me, Shane was completely blindsided. Vanessa had lied to him too, claiming her investment funds came from a family inheritance and that I was an abusive husband she was trying to leave. Shane sat back in horror, realizing he was being used as much as I was. Before leaving him to sweat over his own crumbling secret, I made it abundantly clear that I was going to ruin her legally and financially. I returned upstairs just as Vanessa was waking up. Seeing me at her bedside, she immediately put on a weak, pathetic facade, trying to hold my hand and claim she was terrified. I didn't flinch. I calmly listed every single fact: the STI, the secret abortion, the $73,000 stolen from our savings, the maxed-out credit cards, and her corporate partnership with Shane. Panic replaced her frail act instantly. She tried to deny it, but I told her I'd already spoken to Shane, exposed everything to him, and secured every bank record. Her face went completely pale as she realized her entire web of lies had unraveled in a single afternoon. I leaned over her hospital bed and gave her a final ultimatum: sign over the house, relinquish all claims to my retirement accounts, assume full responsibility for the credit card debt, and execute an uncontested divorce within 48 hours, or I would press criminal charges for fraud and grand larceny. 2 days later, Vanessa signed every piece of paper my lawyer put in front of her without a single word of protest. Shane, desperate to protect his own marriage and business reputation, quietly bought out her stake in Meridian Design and cut all ties with her. Deprived of her lover, her stolen money, and her lifestyle, Vanessa was forced to move back in with her parents in Florida, utterly disgraced. Meanwhile, I sold our suburban house, paid off the remaining debts, and used the leftover cash to buy a small, quiet place near the water. I spent the following weekend at Rick's bar, sipping bourbon with the best friend who had saved me from complete ruin. I had lost my wife and my savings, but in the end, I reclaimed my life, my freedom, and my future. And as it turns out, that was worth far more than dignity ever was. I finally stepped into my bright new beginning, completely unburdened and ready for whatever came next.